start because I know this is running from 1 till 2, and obviously it's people's lunch hours. So thank you very much and a warm welcome to this webinar. Really appreciate you guys giving up your time to join us today. Time is a very precious commodity, so thank you very much, and hope you'll get something out of this of value too. Thank you for that time. We're really pleased here at Seaways to have Javvad Mallick with us. He's a security evangelist from Know Before, and luckily for me, he is going to take over very soon and do the bulk of the talking throughout the presentation. So I just kind of want to start off with a few bits from me. Now, I really like this quote. I mean, security systems have to win every time. The attacker only has to win once. And I think this kind of sums up security in general, and not just cybersecurity, in the fact that, you know, we face threats these days from many different threat vectors, attacks coming from different ways, and we have to defend and repel every one of those on multiple fronts. But the attacker only has to win once. We have to literally win every battle. They only need to win once. So I think, you know, when we look at cybersecurity, we really do need to take it seriously and look at all the avenues where we may face threats and trying to counteract those. In terms of what we'd like you to get out of today, really, I think that the takeaways for us is we've called this, you know, how to create a human firewall. And I think the important thing to know is your staff are your weakest link, but can be your best line of defense. They're the people that under pressure could click a link in an email or insider threats. So what we need to do is take those staff and turn them into a really resilient line of defense, so a human firewall. What we're going to be looking to cover in this is obviously giving you tips and tricks. How do you spot some of these phishing emails? How do you spot the scams? What can you do? What does the threat landscape look like at the moment? So they're the kind of things by the end of this hour, we hope you'll have a much better understanding of and more insight into. And just as an additional thank you, you've got those takeaways, but we're also going to be pinging you during the course of this. My good colleague Carly will be sending you across an email with a Just Eat voucher in. So after this, you can order something to eat, or you can save it up and use it whenever. So that's just an additional thank you from us all for attending and giving us the time today. Now, it would be a little remiss, and I'm not going to focus too much on us today. This is about looking at how we can help you and then educating you around the things you need to think about when you look at cybersecurity. But, you know, as a business, we've been going 24 years. We cover all the way from network design through to disposal, through to, you know, helping you really establish a cybersecurity strategy. From us point of view, we take data very seriously. We have in territory backup services. We're ISO accredited and Cyber Essentials accredited. And as you can see from this slide here, which I'm not really going to touch on too much, we do everything from cyber security, wireless infrastructure. We do a lot around access control and IP CCTV. So yeah, we cover an awful lot. So if there's anything that grabs your fancy in that lot, please feel free to reach out afterwards. So now I am just going to hand over. So I'm going to stop sharing my slide deck and hand over to Javvad, who's going to take you through what the security landscape looks like. So thank you very much, Javvad. I will stop sharing now and hand over control to you, and off we go. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Simon. And thank you everyone for joining us today. As Simon said, like you're giving up your lunch hour. So hope you got something fancy. These lunch and learns traditionally in the olden times, they were all like, you know, you could hear the clickety china and the waiters coming and going. And now we just have to make do with a box of takeaway in front of us. But oh well, or hopefully you're at home and you've got some nice home cooked food. Anyway, we're going to talk a bit about some of the modern cyber attacks and how we can stay safe, particularly in the age of the pandemic. So this is my vanity slide. I've worked in IT security, information security, cyber security my entire career, and I've worked in nearly every role there is within that. I work for Know Before. We are the world's largest integrated security awareness training and simulator phishing platform. You can tell I've read that line a few times, but yeah, we basically focus on the human side of security. We do believe it's often neglected part amongst all the shiny tools, which are very important, but humans ultimately they make the decisions. And so we focus on helping people make better security and risk decisions every day. Anyway, Steve Jobs said that you need to have 3 points. Well, I read it in a book about him, but the agenda, what are the problems we face, the types of scams, and then how can we defend ourselves? And one of the biggest problems is that, on the internet, no one knows if you're a dog or a cat or whatever. And so that's one of the original problems that has always been there. There's this, from before we even had big social media platforms and, people were connecting through IRC channels and what have you, knowing who you were speaking to was one of the biggest challenges. So that's not really changed. I mean, nowadays, there was a period maybe where you had a certain level of trust, but over time, I mean, how many times have you received a LinkedIn invite from an attractive person who looks like they could be a model, and they're like, you have no mutual connections, you know nothing about them, and they're like, I'm really impressed by all your knowledge, let's connect. And you're like, nice try, hackers, not today, not today. But identifying or knowing who's there on the other end is a challenge from day one, and it carries on going. I really like this slide. It's kind of like a joke in a way, but it's also true, which is great. You could have as many security tools as you want, as in like a shiny coat of armor. But if you make a mistake, there's always that gap, which is the human element. So, if you reuse your password across different sites, then, which most people do, let's be honest, or you have a favorite 5 passwords that you use some variation of across most sites, what a criminal will do, they will see what that password is. If it's been, so let's say, for example, you shop at fluffykittens.com and fluffykittens.com gets attacked and your email and passwords are exposed there. As a criminal, one of the first things I'll do is I will take that email and password combination and I will say, you use this email and password at fluffykittens.com. Let's see if you use the same thing on PayPal. Let's see if you use the same thing on your email. Let's see if you use the same one as your Facebook ID and password, and go through as many sites as I can think of. And so this leads to a lot of accounts that end up being compromised that way. We call this, I suppose the technical term is credential stuffing, the middle sort of icon over here, credential stuffing. There's also credential phishing, which is on the left, which is basically where someone will send you an email, they'll say, and it will look like it's come from Microsoft, and say, there's something wrong with your account, click here to log on to your Office 365 account, and we'll fix it. So you click on the link, you don't want your email to go down, and it will look like it's a Microsoft sign-on page. You put in your email and password, and guess what? It's not actually Microsoft that sent you that email. It's not a Microsoft site. In the back end, some bad guys now got your email address and password, and they will then try to log on, and they will do all sorts of bad things. They might send emails to your colleagues. And this is very, very common. It's scary how common it is. In Australia, just a few months ago, sort of like last year, there was a hedge fund, and their CEO got an email. Well, he got a meeting invite. It was a Zoom invite, like pretty much like this one that we all received. And he clicked on the link, and nothing happened. The meeting didn't open or something, and he thought nothing of it. He thought, oh, maybe someone misscheduled it or something, and what have you. Now, what that actually was there was malware in the back end that stole his email address and password and gave it to the bad guys. And they logged on to that CEO's email account, and they sent an email to the accounts department saying, hey, send a payment of $5 million to this new bank account. It's a new customer or something like that. Now that was discovered the next day, and the CEO contacted the banks, and they recovered most of the money. Some of the money, like I think about 200,000 was spent, but they were able to recover most of the money. Unfortunately, news of that got out, and some of their biggest investors, they were like, we don't really trust you anymore. You can't take care of your emails. You can't take care of my money. You got it back this time. How do I know you're going to get it back next time? And they withdrew their money. As a result, the hedge fund went under. So, you can see how a simple thing like clicking on a link and giving someone access to your email account can have catastrophic consequences. And then there's password spraying. And this is where criminals will just use well-known passwords to try and break into your account. So one thing I'd suggest, I'm not just here to tell you doom and gloom and make your food taste horrible, but is this website, haveibeenpawned.com. You can go there. It's a safe password, and enter in one of your email addresses, personal email address, probably preferred, or you can put in your work one. And then if you click pawned, it will tell you if that email address has been involved in any breach. So it will tell you, oh, there was the Adobe breach, or there was the LinkedIn breach, and what have you. So bad guys probably have the password that you use in those sites. Now, if you use the same password in that site as you have done elsewhere, that's a good time for you to then think, maybe I should change my password. So having unique passwords is really important, and not reusing them is a key. There was a show called Mr. Robot, and this is one of my favorite quotes from it, which sums it about up, that people are vulnerable. And they are vulnerable to the same manipulations that were used by con artists for a long, long time. And this is usually by trying to generate an emotional response that, leads to some sort of trust or something. And so we see a ton of this going on all the time. Any email that you receive, or a phone call or a text message that's trying to get you to do something, they're trying to pull on some emotional string there to do it. Now, the next question is, like, sometimes you get a call and someone's saying, hey, we're from your bank account, there's a problem, we want you to validate some details. And it's like, well, how do they know this stuff? How do they know? Sometimes they call you, they know your full name, they know who you bank with, and all that kind of stuff. And the answer to that is OSSINT. OSSINT is an acronym. It stands for Open Source Intelligence. And what it is basically using publicly available sources and then using that information in an intelligence context. It's not dark web, it's not nothing like that. It's basically anything that's available online. So for example, I know your email, I know your full, and your name, or maybe I only know your email, but from your email, I can deduce what your full name is. If it uses your full name in the email, it might be first name dot surname at companyname.com. I've then figured out who you work for, and maybe there are some online documents or websites and what have you. With this bit of information, I can then spider on from there. I can figure out, well, if this is your full name, here's your social media account, here's your work history, this is possibly where you live. And for many of you now, this is probably beginning to feel familiar. Like, oh, how many times have you started to embark down this route when, say, you want to hire, say, a babysitter, or you want to go on a date with someone new, or you want to, investigate a company that you're considering working for. We kind of like do this thing. So this isn't anything that's always malicious in nature, but you can see how bad guys can start piecing together, and they're far more determined, and they use some automated tools as well to gather information. But their intent is very different. They will also then tap into those kinds of breaches that have happened in the past. They'll get that data and they'll use it all together. And from that, they can even get more information. This kind of information is readily available, and anyone with enough time and patience, you don't even need like the automated tools, but you can actually find out a lot about someone through these methods. You can it's so funny. Like you go on LinkedIn or a recruitment website and you see that X company is hiring for a developer, and they'll list out all the technologies they have. They'll list out how many people are in their team. They'll, you can find out on their website how the organization is structured. You can find out what the email address is. So it becomes very easy for a criminal to just harvest all this information. And it's very difficult. This is like putting the genie back into the bottle. We've already put a ton of this information out there, and it's very hard to get it back in. And the problem is that a lot of this information we use for sensitive purposes or authentication. How many times have you phoned up, say, like a provider, like a mobile provider, and say, I've forgotten my password, but here's my phone number. And they're like, okay, tell me, what's your date of birth then? And you said, like, okay. And you can easily find that out from Facebook. What day does someone wish someone happy birthday? Okay, that's their date of birth. Very good. Or what's your mother's maiden name? Or what's the color of your eyes? And all that kind of stuff. It's so easily available, yet we rely on that for sensitive purposes all the time. So those are kind of some of the problems we face. There's a lot of information out there. We reuse passwords a lot of the time, and attackers will go after the human side more successfully than if they attack the technologies. So there are many types of scams out there. So this is an example of an untargeted attack. Many of you might have received an email like this. It claims to be from Netflix. It's, dear Netflix, we are sending you an email to let you know that your credit card has expired. Click here to update your account. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't do this now, you might be at work and you got this email, and you're not even thinking that I haven't even got my work email registered to this, but you're thinking, oh my gosh, if I don't update this now, kids are at home, wife is at home, my 3 cousins that share my account, they're all going to lose access to my Netflix account. So let me click here and quickly update my credit card details. And you probably guessed it, it's not going to take you to Netflix's account web page. It's going to take you to a criminal-owned one, and they're going to have all of your data. There's a story from last year where Norway State Investment Fund had $10 million stolen. And what was interesting about this was it didn't involve like really sophisticated hacking techniques that you would imagine from a movie. It's not like someone was sitting there in a basement, green code falling down, and after like about 30 seconds of banging away on the keyboard, they were like, I'm in. This was literally an email that was sent to an employee, said, hey, we need to change where the payment's going, send it now to this bank account. And the employee obliged, and they sent the email there. So, it's a very simple thing. I mean, it's simple. What happened in the background was that the criminals were actually observing the emails for a period of time, so they knew what kind of language they used in emails and who to target and when to target them, so that it wouldn't set off any alarm bells in the employee's mind to change that. Primarily, this is a process breakdown. One employee shouldn't have the ability to make a large payment or change who the payment's going to for any organization. So have a look at your processes internally. Does one person have the ability just to go out and spend 10 grand on a whim? And depending on the size of your organization, if you're a small or medium size, that could be a significant amount. So, do you have a process in place where maybe 2 people need to authorize something, or maybe an email isn't enough to authorize something? You need someone to physically say that that's okay, or they need to enter it into some financial system, all sorts of things. Depending on how you're set up, you want to consider how you want to do that. And you may say, aha, but we use a phone call to validate it. So I will call up, or I will wait for a call from my CEO to say, make that payment. And this is what happened to a company here in the UK, where someone received a phone call that they believed to be from the CEO of the German parent company. And he was told to transfer 220,000 euros to the bank account of a Hungarian supplier. Now, the article went on to say that maybe they use some deep fake technology, like the computer analyzed the voice of the real CEO and generated something that sounded like him, and that's why it was so convincing. And that's neither proven nor disproven. The question is, like, how many people actually really know or can tell the difference between, you know, someone's CEO and a really good voice actor, or someone that has a similar accent, or something like that. I mean, if you're very close to them and you speak to them frequently, you're going to know. But if it's out of the blue, this is really urgent, I need you to do something for me. Again, it's pulling that on that employee's emotions and saying, hey, you need to do something for me right now, and you don't want to let the boss down. Again, having some sort of process in place to validate that, or, you know, the employee just being, the problem is that employees, because they're not aware that this is an attack that could happen, they're not prepared for it. There was this case in America last year where there was a convenience store, one of those big chains or whatever, and an employee was working their shift. It was nearing the end of their shift, and the next employee came in to relieve them of their shift. And so the next employee came in, took over the till, started serving customers, and the one who just ended their shift, they left. Now, what happened is that after a few minutes of serving customers, the new shift person closed the shutters, took out all the cigarettes, the booze, emptied out the till, and walked out. Although they were wearing a polo with the company logo on it and everything, they weren't actually an employee. So they just literally walked in brazen, no threats, no gun, no nothing like that, and just said, I'm here to relieve you of your shift. And they took over and they emptied out everything. The interesting thing here is that, you know, again, it's a process breakdown. It's not something that's a hack or you know, something that someone's very sophisticated. They just know that people aren't expecting someone to be so brazen to walk in and say, I'm here to relieve you of your duties. So therefore, it's quite important to just let people know, hey, if someone comes in and you don't know them, or they're not being told, then phone up the agency, say, hey, so-and-so's come in, are they here to take over? And if they are, or there's a password, or there's some sort of key they have, you know, have some process in place. During the last year, we've seen so many of these scams come through that are related to the coronavirus. NHS, HMRC, these are some of the two of the most spoofed brands in this regard over the year. Some of you might have received an email like this that's saying, hey, it's part of the NHS promise, you know, here's a payment, follow the link. And if you follow the link, it looks like it's going to HMRC or a government website, and it's not. Again, it's like, you know, put in your bank details and we'll send you the money, or put in the debit card details, and what they're doing, they're actually taking the money away from you. Similarly, it's not just through email, it's through text messages these things come. And over here, they're not even trying to hide the fact that it's not the legit web address. But then how many people are actually looking at that, and especially on the mobile phone, and if people are not aware, and it goes through and it takes you through the postcode and what have you. And unfortunately, lots of people have lost a lot of money. You know, you see these things going through HMRC, scam, refund, what have you. There's also this case where last year, Twitter had a major breach, and all these big blue tick accounts started tweeting out like, you know, click here and buy Bitcoin and what have you. And, you know, they were actually just sending money to these scammers and what have you. And again, it wasn't a major technological flaw in Twitter. It was someone just basically got in touch with an employee and convinced them that they were also a fellow employee, and that's how they got access. I've got these the wrong way, but this child, very cute, very nice, but doesn't exist. As the URL suggests, this person does not exist.com. If you go to this website, it will generate a very realistic looking face just using deepfake technology. And this is where things, if we go back to the original problem of like, we can't authenticate who's who or what they're doing and what they're not doing, who they are and whether they're really who they claim to be. Sites like this and technologies like this are becoming really useful for criminals. You can take this and especially if you shrink it down, make it into a thumbnail and set it up as a Facebook profile or a LinkedIn profile, maybe not for child, but you want to use an adult's one, it becomes very convincing. And this is then a picture that people can't reverse search and look up and see, where did this come from? You can see there's some weird artifacts here. You can see the hands aren't perfect. They're kind of like looking a bit weird, like lumps of meat on top of each other. But and other photos you'll see if you go to the website, the hair will be out of place or there'll be extra teeth or something. But overall, it's generally very, very convincing. And so, these are another sort of like utilities in the arsenal of attackers. And, a lot of it is just about, understanding the human psyche. And, this is where, you can defeat so many controls if a person is gets enticed enough. And, we've seen these things like clickbait headlines, like, they wanted groceries. Nobody expected this. Click this here and see this video to see what happens next. And I know these are clickbait titles, and I know this doesn't go anywhere, but I read these and I still feel like, oh, I wonder what happens. It's just a natural curiosity. And, these things are like it leverages this pattern interruption to create curiosity, because there's a gap in your information and you just want to fill it. You want to know what's happened, how's it happened, and it also leverages outrage and anger. So, this is where we see political sort of ads and being very, very effective. If you can say, hey, here's so-and-so politician that you don't like, and you won't believe what they said next. And that angers you. And you're like, oh, they're always spouting about this and that and the other. And you click through in anger. And that's another technique that people use. Sometimes it's just, sometimes it could be someone like Simon at the beginning, acting very nice and polite, and then telling you, oh, there's a Just Eat voucher coming into your inbox. Now, hopefully by now, you're going to be sufficiently suspicious that you're going to think, I wonder if that's actually a gift voucher or not. If you go ahead and click on that and try to redeem it, you're a braver person than I. Sorry, Simon. No, that's a joke. I'm sure it's all legit, but I don't know. What do I know?
I swear it's legit, honestly. We're not harvesting information as we go, really.
So with that, I think, we are sufficiently aware of some of the breadth of problems that are out there. So the question then is, like, how can we defend ourselves, and probably just as importantly, our organizations that we work for? I think that one of the first things is, like, just to be aware and to understand whether you're being manipulated, and to understand the laws that all these criminals use, whether it's greed or curiosity, self-interest. These are all the things they're pulling at all the time. I mean, it's like when they send you an email, it's always like, click here now, or you're going to lose your account or access to your account. You'll never see a scammer get in touch with you and say, well, there's a problem with your account, get in touch whenever it's convenient for you. No, they'll always say, like, get in touch within the next 12 hours or you're going to lose access to your account. And that's just, all of these things are designed to manipulate you, to get you into doing something that goes against your interest. The second thing is protect your passwords. And even I think passwords is a misleading sort of phrase. Passphrases would be better. So, the longer it is, the more secure. And, there's lots of debates as to what constitutes a secure password. But I think using unique passwords is really, really important. So, I mean, if you use something like a password manager or a password vault, It can help you generate a long secure password and store your credentials so you don't need to remember it, and use different passwords across different accounts, or at least have them tiered so that your most important accounts, you have unique passwords, and then maybe if you have like throwaway, you sign up for certain things like vouchers and what have you, then if you want to reuse passwords along them, then just keep it to them, but nothing that is absolutely essential. And also enable, if available, some multi-factor authentication. And multi-factor authentication, if you're not aware, is basically where you use more than one way to validate who you are, authenticate who you are. So you give your password, that's one form, and then sometimes it's a second form is something like a fingerprint. So if it's on a phone or a tablet or something like that, you have fingerprints built in and you can use that as a second form. Sometimes they will text you a code, or sometimes you can have an authenticator app running in your phone that you open up, and that's got a code that changes every like 60 seconds or so. And you need to put that in alongside your ID and password. And those are great because what that means is that even if someone is able to steal your ID and password, they still can't log on to your account, because after you put in the email account and password, it will say, what's your authenticator code? And unless they have your phone and they can get into your authenticator app, they won't be able to do that. There are also like some physical keys you can get. There's a company called YubiKey. They have like a fingerprint sensor on it, whatever, but it's like a little USB device that you plug into your laptop, or you tap it on your phone, and that provides that additional mechanism of authentication. So it might not be something that you, in the corporate world, you want to enable absolutely everywhere, because it might cause like a bit of disruption, but absolutely have it on your critical things, and your email is definitely one of those areas, and like finance apps and what have you. Also have a way, give users a way to report any kinds of phishing attacks or suspicious activity, or what have you. This is just an example, like we provide a phish alert button. If you're interested, like if an email comes in and the users, you look at it and you think that doesn't feel quite right, you click that button and it sends it automatically to your security team, and then they can safely examine it, and then they can let you know. They say, well, thank you for reporting that was a phishing attack, well done. And then you can reward them internally, or you can say, hey, we've checked it, thank you for reporting it, it's actually just a really poorly worded email from a legit person, so you can carry on without worry. So this is fine for emails, but like when you're back in the office, if there's a stranger in the office, or someone's not wearing their badge, or if someone finds a USB drive and they're not sure what's on it, how do you get that to the right people without endangering your company? So if you pick up a USB and you plug it in, you have no idea what's on there. It could be some virus on there, it could be some malware, and this is actually a technique that criminals use as well. They've been a lot of security testers in their testing. What they do, they'll get a USB stick, and on it they'll write bonuses 2021, and they'll just casually drop it in the car park or the lobby, and someone will pick it up and inevitably be like, bonuses, I want to see how much everyone's getting in bonus payments, and they'll plug it into their machine, and it won't actually be bonuses. In terms of raising awareness and education, I think there's two sides to it. One is like, what do people know, and the other is how they act. And what they do is far more important than what they know. And in this regard, I think we need to think like marketers. And when I say we, I mean security professionals, or people trying to spread the security knowledge. They need to think more like marketers. Don't worry so much about whether people understand the intricacies of everything, how it goes on and doesn't, but focus on what behaviors we want people to adopt. So if I get into the car, I want my kids to put on the seatbelt. I'm not really too fussed as to whether they understand how much force impact causes and the internal injuries that can occur, or whether someone can go flying out the window in the front. You know, those are secondary, but as long as I know they sit in the car and they put on their seatbelt, that's the behavior that I want them to adopt. So if you grew up in the 80s like me, you know, clunk clink, even on the shortest trips, that was there to encourage people to, or remind them to wear their seatbelts. And this was repeated. It was on TV. It was the same message on radio, on billboards, on posters. It was the same message repeated time and time again. And eventually that became, you know, embedded within society. And, you know, obviously like law enforcement had a fact to do with it and what have you. But my kids have never been exposed to that advert, but they've learned that behavior because they see me or my wife putting on our seatbelts, or they see other people driving and they've all got their seatbelts, and someone not wearing the seatbelt is an odd thing. It's like, why aren't they wearing their seatbelt? So hopefully if we adopt some of these practices in security, we can get to a point where it's like, well, what do you mean we lived in a time when people just blindly clicked on links and gave them their ID and password, or they sent massive payments of millions of pounds to new parties just because they got an email from someone they thought was their boss? This is kind of like a framework that I think works really well in that context. It's like, you know, have an ongoing automated phishing or social or some form of testing that goes on. And phishing is a really easy way of testing your employees. So that's where you send an email that, you know, it's like the Netflix email or the LinkedIn email or something like that. It's not a real one, but it's not malicious either. It's just there to help educate people. So you send it to people and say, hey, here's a new offer. Here's a Just Eat voucher from Simon. Click here. And you click on it and they'll say, well, actually, if you'd looked at the email, it wasn't actually from Simon. If you looked at the spelling, it was misspelled. If you looked at the URL, it wasn't going there. So those kinds of things are really good to do on an ongoing basis because it gets people involved and it helps reinforce the learning. And it is a learning opportunity. It's not something that, you know, you do to catch people out. It's there to help them to learn. Reinforce that with, you know, when you have executive or departmental sort of meetings, like your managers, reinforce that message. So, you know, for this quarter, we're focusing on, you know, not plugging in unknown devices. So that's something that you have some testing about, and then you have messages that repeat that. You have some learning modules, maybe you have some, you know, awareness videos or audio files or something that people need to listen to. There's newsletters that you can use to reinforce that. And then there's any digital signage or whatever your channels may be. But these are sort of like how you go about building a marketing-based security awareness plan. Finally, you can share something like this. Like we also have like lots of infographics like this. It's this to help people identify social engineering red flags. And this is great because although this is for email specifically, the principles can be used whether someone's phoning you or texting you, emailing you, you know, or whether they're DMing you on some social media platform. And, you know, it can help you to be more vigilant and aware. Because when we look at majority of the attacks that are happening today, the successful ones, whether it be a simple scam, like trying to get, you know, 50 quid off someone because they thought that HMRC is giving them a refund, all the way through to ransomware, which is a massive problem for large corporations. You know, they all typically, majority of them will start from some sort of social engineering attack because that's the most easiest way. So if you can make people aware of that and you can get them to protect their credentials and all that kind of good stuff, you'll be in a far, far better position to detect these and stop them, hopefully, or even if they are successful, be able to recover from them a lot quicker, if you will. So with that, I hope you're nearly at dessert now. Thank you very much for your time. Here's my contact details and what have you, if you want to tell me how I'm wrong or ask more information later. Otherwise, I will hand you back to Simon.
Thank you. I will just share my screen. So yeah, no, there's some really interesting stuff coming out of that. And I was sitting there and it reminded me of some things. And Javvad, you could probably correct me if some of this is wrong, but I think, you know, from talking to people, I've been in the IT industry for a number of years now, but from talking to people, you know, there's this misconception that a hacker kind of attacks your computer, he's there, and then he disappears again. When in fact, I think it was reported something like the average hacker remains in a network for about 180 days. And what they do is they siphon off information, they watch, like we're talking about the attacks there where you mimic a CEO or whatever. They watch, they look at the tone, they look at when's a good time to, because with social engineering attacks, it's Friday afternoon, everyone's rushing to get down to a pub in some alternate reality. You know, you've got 5 minutes till they go, let's send an email that needs action. So they don't look at it and they click and they engineer things that way. So, you know, hackers aren't just there once they get into your system for you know, 5 minutes and then they're out again. But this kind of bleaching of information that we have, I mean, it's quite, when you look at it, it is quite scary. But it reminded me of a story, and I think this was a couple of years back, which was during the Middle Eastern conflicts. Obviously, the US had bases out there that were top secret, and they didn't give any information away. But actually, what was happening was the troops were running the perimeter, jogging around with their like Garmin's on or whatever, and uploading their route. So literally, you had this route in the middle of the desert, showing the perimeter of the base, and it's just mad the level of information that's actually out there at the moment. I mean, from our point of view, what we do is we help businesses ensure that obviously they can adopt the right kind of security cultures and build the right tools in place to help mitigate those risks, like two-factor authentication. So I think that was really interesting, giving us an overview of that. I think that the next bit really is to open up the floor, and please don't put any questions to me. The email with the Just Eat voucher on is coming to you, but probably not from me. It might be the events or Carly. So it won't have my email address on, as we referenced earlier. But yeah, opening up the floor to anyone who has any questions, really. Are there any questions out there?